I love Christmas time. Christmas is one of my favorite seasons. And I was thinking of a time where I asked for something that I really wanted. I thought about a gift that I really wanted. And I'm a Ravens fan. So one year when I think I was in 5th grade, I asked for a lot of presents, but the main present that I wanted, all I really wanted, was this nice winter Ravens coat. I just desperately wanted that nice winter Ravens coat. I was so excited for it. I asked for more than that, but that was the main thing I wanted. So I'm going to open that last present, and my dad, he's filming the whole thing. I'm sitting there, and my brother, who's 2 years younger than me, was sitting next to me. And I start to open this present, and wouldn't you know it, it's that Ravens coat I've been hoping for. And I pull it out, and I go, yes! And I put it on, and I'm like so happy. And my dad, while he's filming, can notice is my brother, Shane, who did not ask for a Ravens coat, mind you, but then realized it was a mistake to not ask for a Ravens coat because he saw how much joy it brought me. And he's sitting there watching me, and he's in his head like, oh, why didn't I ask for a Ravens coat? I really want a Ravens coat now. And my dad, being an astute, great father that he is, he sees that my brother is jealous of my Ravens coat. So what he says to my brother says, don't worry, Shane, you got a coat too. And Shane went, I did? And my dad said, yeah, you get Eric's old one. He doesn't need it anymore. He got a new Ravens coat. And my brother, it's the best memory I have of Christmas. I get something and my brother's disappointed. It's a great Christmas for me. But I love Christmas, and I always think about, whenever Christmas time comes, we normally think about what we want for Christmas, right? If you're a kid or an adult or older, you write Christmas lists, and you think, here's all I want for Christmas is this. This is what I want, this big present. Or when you hear this, all I want for Christmas, you think, all I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth. Like maybe that song. Or all I want for Christmas is you, baby. I'm so sorry for doing that. That was a mistake. Maybe for some of you, all you want for Christmas is to never hear that Mariah Carey song ever again. It was actually playing before a lot of you guys got here, and the worship team almost quit on me. They're like, if we keep hearing this song, they hate that song. But for many of us, when it comes to Christmas time, we might think of all these things that we want when it comes to presents and some of the fun, holly jolly stuff what Christmas season brings. But for a lot of us, Christmas time is a reminder that we want something more, that we want something deeper than just presents or what Christmas has to bring. And it might be fun, and we might like the traditions, but for some of us, it's a reminder that we need something else, that we need something more. Christmas time, it's the best time of year to ask more out of life, because Christmas time and the Christmas story reveals to us the things that we truly need in life, and those things that we need, only God can give us. So today, for some of us, all you want for Christmas is another chance. You have mistakes or regrets in your life, and you just think, man, if I could just do that over again. All I really want for Christmas is another chance. So I was looking up some historical regrets while I was preparing for this, and I found some pretty crazy historical regrets, some of the biggest historical regrets that you'll find. You guys know J.K. Rowling, right? The author of Harry Potter. She took the book Harry Potter, and she was turned down by 12 different publishers turned her down. Did you know that? 12 different publishers said, no, we're not going to be able to sell that. That's not going to work. It wasn't until Bloomsbury took that book after a chairman's 8-year-old daughter said that they liked the book. That's the only reason they took it. And now Harry Potter has sold over $1 billion worth of books. So that was a mistake from those other publishers, right? There's the CEO of Excite named George Bell. He had the opportunity to buy Google for $1 million in 1999. But instead, he didn't want it for $1 million. He lowballed them and bid for $750,000. Google said no. You know how much Google is worth today? $365 billion. That was a mistake, huh? That was a regret. I saw this story of this Japanese trader who accidentally traded 610,000 shares for 1 yen, when he was actually supposed to sell 1 share for 610,000 yen. That's a bad day. That's a mistake. And then, I don't know if you guys knew this, but NASA, you know they accidentally taped over the moon landing? Do you know that? There's no original recordings of the moon landing. They taped over it. There was a football game came on or something. They taped it. I don't know what they did, but they taped over. There's no known original recordings of that event. There are some major historical regrets in our world. But for some of us, our regrets are worse than those. You think about some of the relationships you were in, and you think, that was a mistake. I regret that. Or maybe the way you handled those relationships. Maybe the person you were in those relationships. Maybe you think back about your parenting. Like, oh man, if I could do that over, I would do it differently. Man, that's a mistake. Maybe you look back at your first job or your second job and think, that was a mistake. The way I was an employee there. Or my college days, that was a mistake. My high school days, decisions I made, that was a mistake. For a lot of us, we have regrets in life. All of us have regrets. And for some of us, those regrets are still haunting us today. And they make us feel unworthy today, or they make us feel not good enough today. And some of us, even here today, feel like certain aspects of our life are falling apart because of the mistakes we've made in our past, because of who we think we are, because of what we've done. Maybe your marriage is not the way you thought it would be, and you feel like it's falling apart. Maybe your finances are falling apart. Maybe your parenting, your relationships, and it's all because of something you did in your past and a mistake that you made or something you're struggling with, and now you're struggling with keeping things together. Some of you just dream to have another chance. Man, if I could just do that over again, I would. I would do it completely different. And you all know this, just like I know this, but we don't have any do-overs in life. We can't do things over. But we all do get another chance. All of us get another chance. So if you ever felt like you were falling apart and wish you had another chance, here's what we're going to learn today. That God has a part for people falling apart. God has a part for people falling apart. If you feel like in a certain situation in your life you were just falling apart, God has a part for you. God has a part for people falling apart. We're going to learn that today. So many of us know the Christmas story that you can find in the Bible, but not all of us know where the Christmas story actually starts. When we think of the Christmas story, we think of Jesus being born and the wise men and the manger and the angels, but actually the Christmas story doesn't start with Jesus at all. It actually starts with a guy named John. So we're going to be talking from Luke chapter 1. If you have your Bibles, Luke chapter 1, we're going to start at verse 5. It'll be up on the screen as well. But a little background on Luke chapter 1 before we really dive in. Here in Luke, there has been 400 years of silence from God. So you look at Malachi, which is the last book of the Old Testament, and then the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, those Gospels. There's been 400 years of God not making any noise, God not showing up, nothing. 400 years. So the Israelites, God's chosen people, the Jewish people, for 400 years have been praying to God that they haven't heard from. And God promised that this Messiah was coming, but for 400 years, they didn't hear anything from him. They didn't hear anything from him. And here, the birth of John is the very first sign from God for over 400 years of silence. He breaks his silence with the birth of John. John is the forerunner of Jesus being born. John was there to prepare everybody for Jesus' birth and to point to Jesus. So let's start with his parents and how this all happened in verse 5. So Luke chapter 1, verse 5. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Now, back then, we need to know, so we have Zechariah and we have Elizabeth. They were both considered very good Christian people. They were both considered good in the sight of God. Zechariah is a priest, so he's doing a very holy job, but they don't have any kids. Now, back then, women, and don't get offended by this because we obviously don't believe this today, and we actually don't believe this today because of Jesus. That's a sermon for another day. But so back then, women, the only thing they were really good for was having kids. That was it. Besides that, they were as good as cattle to men. That's just the place they were in that culture. So here, Elizabeth is not able to have kids. So she has that grief and that shame of not having a kid. And if any of you have struggled with not having kids, you know this feeling, right? Back then, they didn't understand science. They believed that you were cursed if you couldn't have a kid, that you did something wrong and God made sure you weren't going to have a kid. They believed you were cursed. So everyone looks at Elizabeth, because it's not Zechariah's fault, it's always the woman's fault back then, and say, what did you do wrong? What did you do? Like, you did something wrong. God's mad at you, and that's why you don't have a kid. So they've been living with this burden of not having a kid, of not having an heir this whole time. Now, Zechariah, his job as a priest, he was actually one out of 18,000 priests that were around back then. And once a year, Zechariah had to go serve at the temple. And then they would draw lots, and the lucky person would be able to serve in the Holy of Holies, which is the holiest place. And wouldn't you know it, Zechariah is the lucky person this time to go into the Holy of Holies. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Zechariah. He's at the pinnacle of his career, and here's what happens in verse 11. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was crippled with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John." The angel goes on to explain what John's going to do, that John's going to be filled with the Holy Spirit, that John is going to prepare the way for the Messiah, that John is going to turn all these people that have abandoned God, because remember, 400 years of silence have gone by, so a lot of people abandoned God. He's going to turn all these people back to God so that when Jesus comes, they're ready for him. And he explains all that. And then in verse 18, listen to how Zechariah responds to the best news he's probably ever heard, that he's finally going to have a kid. Here's his response to the angel. "How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in her years." Can you prove this? Like, this is going to happen? So he's in the Holy of Holies. He's in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He's had this weight of not having a kid. Elizabeth had this weight of not having a kid. This angel shows up and says, "You're finally going to have a kid." And he goes, "Prove it." "Are you sure?" He questions the angel. Continuing on in verse 19. Then the angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you the good news. And now you will be silent and not be able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." So you know what? If you're going to question me, you're going to be silent. Not going to be able to say a word. And this whole time when you're preparing for John to be born, you're not going to be able to say one single thing. Zechariah eventually goes back to his wife Elizabeth and says this, the last two verses we're going to look at. "When his time of service was complete, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion." We're going to talk about that. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." This story of Zechariah and Elizabeth, if you're a person today that feels like your life and certain areas of your life is just falling apart because of the situations you're in, because of the mistakes you made, whatever reason, this story of Zechariah and Elizabeth is a story for you, because it's a story of another chance. It's a story of a second chance. So here's what we normally do. When we start to feel not good enough, we start to feel like our life's falling apart, we normally do three things. And this is three things that Zechariah and Elizabeth all did. Here's the first thing. The first thing we do is we stop expecting. We stop expecting anything. You know what? I don't expect anything's going to happen. My wife and I, when we first went out on a date, we had a really good first date. We went to putt-putt. I won. Just a little side note. I don't know if you needed to know that, but I did. She got a hole-in-one. I didn't, but I won. Then we went to P.F. Chang's for dinner, and it took forever. It took an hour to be sat, and then an hour for our food to come. So we were there for like 3 hours. This is our first date. We hadn't really known each other much, but luckily we got along really well, and everything was great, and those 3 hours were great. And then I took her back to her car. I did not kiss her because I'm a gentleman. It was the first date, right? So I took her back. I opened the door for her, everything. Everything went great. And then for like a week, like everything was going great, I thought. And then after a little bit, she got really stressed with school, and I can be a lot to handle. Some of you guys know that. So after a while, she basically broke it off with me, and she just said, "Hey." She told me we can't be friends anymore. There's a lot more to that story, but we're not going to get into it. But she did tell me we can't be friends anymore. So she called me and told me that, and I said, okay, fine, and then hung up. And for the next week, I fully expected that she was going to text me, because I'm a little arrogant, I guess, and I was like, she's going to realize what she missed. She's going to realize I was such a gentleman. I was great. She's going to realize it. And a week went by. I didn't hear from her. It's like, well, maybe she had to think about it a little more, maybe for the next week, and then she'll text me. I expected it. Next week went by, nothing. I was like, oh, she's really done. She doesn't want to hang out anymore. And the only reason we ended up hanging out and eventually getting married was because a friend of hers invited me up to hang out with them. And she didn't invite me. She didn't want me to be there. So I fully expected that to happen. When life goes wrong, a lot of times we stop expecting anything good to happen because we don't want to get our hopes up. That's why we do that. We want to protect ourselves. And if we start to expect something and it doesn't work out and we're disappointed, we think, well, if I don't expect it at all, then I won't ever be disappointed. So for a lot of us, we stop expecting anything. If we expect God to do something and he doesn't do it and we're disappointed and left there with what we had, then we say, you know what? I'm just not going to expect him to do anything. I'll never be disappointed anymore. I just won't expect it. Zechariah, he was in the Holy of Holies. His job while he was in there was to offer incense, which was a picture of intercession rising to God. And while he's in there are all the other priests are surrounding the temple, and they are saying this prayer that is actually found in the Targum of Canticles, which is a very old Jewish text they would use during Passover. And here's the prayer that they most likely were praying. May the merciful God enter the holy place and accept with favor the offering of his people. So there's a group of people saying, God, please show up. Zechariah's in there, doing stuff, trying to get God to show up. Zechariah's been out there praying, saying that prayer. He knows that prayer. But when the angel shows up, he wasn't expecting it to happen. Zechariah was not expecting anything to happen in there. He wasn't. His responses tell us that. He wasn't expecting anything. And really, why would he? 400 years have gone by and God has done anything. Why would he expect God to do anything? And for some of you, you've stopped expecting God to do anything. You might come here on a Sunday. You might go to some church on Sunday. And you come and you sing the songs, you hear the sermon, but you don't actually expect God to move. You don't actually expect God to change you. You don't actually expect God to apply something. You don't expect that. You're just here because you're here. You got to go to church, right? But you don't expect anything. For some of us, we've stopped expecting. Number two, some of us, we stopped believing. We stopped believing. How many of you believed in Santa Claus at some point in your life? Show of hands. And you believe, okay. I did not. My hand's down. I never believed in Santa. My parents never taught me Santa. So I don't have a story of me not believing in Santa anymore, me realizing that. But I do have a story of my friend Topper, who's back there, when he stopped believing in Santa. The reason why I have a story is because I'm the one who told him that Santa wasn't real. I was in 5th or 6th grade, so he was in like 1st grade, which is prime age to like believe in Santa. And I was just talking about, I can't believe kids still believe in Santa. Like, why would anyone? And he's like, haha, yeah. And he goes home and he's like, Mom, Dad, why did you not tell me? Santa's not real? And he was so disappointed. I'm the one who broke that for him. See, when Zechariah heard this news that he's going to have a baby, his response is he questions it. You know why he's questioning it? Because he doesn't actually believe it's going to happen. And why does he not believe it? Because he's old, and his wife is old. And if you know basic biology, you know that if you're too old, you can't have kids. They knew that back then. Zechariah is probably thinking, if you showed up maybe like 40 years ago, then I'd believe this. Maybe 50 years ago, but we're old now. Prove this to me, because I don't believe it's actually going to happen. Some of us, we've stopped believing that God can do anything with our situations. We've stopped believing that God can do anything with what we have. That you think, man, I don't know if God can use somebody like me. I know my past. I know my mistakes. I know that thing that I don't want anyone else to know about. I know that. I know God knows that. I don't think God can actually do anything with my life. I don't believe it. I don't believe God can do anything about this situation. You might say, I know that God is God, and I know that God is in control and he can do anything, but I don't believe he's actually going to do anything about this. And for some of you, you don't believe it because you've been burned in the past. So you stop believing it. Number 3, what do we do when our life's falling apart? We stop trusting. A lot of us, we stop trusting. All of us have been hurt by somebody else that we trusted, right? We've all gone through that. You've been burned by your last relationship. Maybe you had a relationship and it really hurt you. You were burned by it, so what did you do? You don't trust anybody anymore. A relationship you go into, you're a little defensive now because someone else broke that trust for you. Maybe for you, you were hurt by your parents. So you have trouble trusting any authority figure because your parents, you don't trust them anymore. Maybe for some of you, you've been hurt by church. So you have trouble diving into any church because you've been so hurt and burned by a church. I get it. This year-long process where we were getting ready to plant Impact in September of this past year, for a year I was preparing stuff, and it was really hard for us. It was really hard. And I thought there would be more churches that would get our back. There's a couple of churches that I thought would like really come in and help us and support us. Nothing. Not a thing. There were some people that were like mentors of mine, people that I trusted, that I hung out with all the time, that when I was jobless, I had no idea how we're going to plant this church a year ago, I didn't get a call from any of them. And it hurt. It's weird how church people know how to hurt you the most, right? Like, you would think that we're all here believing that Jesus came and died for us and that we should love everyone else because that's how much Jesus loved us. But yet, so many times we get so hurt and burned by church, and you've been hurt and burned by a church, and you think, I'm not going back into that. Why would I voluntarily put myself in a situation where I'm not doing it anymore? I'm not trusting that. Some of us have done that. Zechariah and Elizabeth, they were hurt. So they stopped trusting God. Elizabeth's response here, it says that she goes in seclusion for 5 months. And what's pretty interesting about this, and I was trying to look this up because I was trying to figure out, what does that mean, going to seclusion for 5 months? That's kind of seems, I don't know, that seems weird. So the Greek word here for seclusion is actually cover up. So really, she didn't actually go and just hide for 5 months. Most likely, she covered her face when she went out. And a lot of scholars have written about it, and I've questioned too, like if you find out you're having a baby, which is the best thing ever for especially a woman back then, you're finding that out, why wouldn't you want to just go tell everybody? But instead, for 5 months, she hides herself. She doesn't want anyone to know. Why? What many scholars believe is that she didn't trust that it was actually going to happen. Again, she was old. When you're old, it's hard to have kids. She stopped trusting. Zechariah stopped trusting. You ever heard the saying, trust is earned? You ever heard that saying? I hate that saying. I don't think trust is earned. I think trust is given. Mistrust is earned. Trust is given. And for some of you, mistrust has been earned over and over and over, so now you stop trusting. So if you're here today and you've stopped expecting, you've stopped believing, you've stopped trusting, and because of that, your life has been falling apart, or maybe because your life has been falling apart, you did these 3 things. What I want you to know today, and the main thing I want you to know is this: God has a part for people falling apart. God has a part for people falling apart. When you allow yourself to stop expecting, when you allow yourself to stop expecting or believing or trusting, when you allow yourself to do that, what you're doing is you're pushing God further and further and further away. That's what you do. Say, I'm not going to expect anymore, so God, you stay over there. And we just keep getting further and further and further away. And then eventually, we're going to be at a safe distance from God. And we're a safe distance. In case anything goes wrong, we're at a safe distance from him because we don't trust or believe or expect anything. And eventually, God's going to say, where are you? And he's going to be waving at you, and you're not going to be able to see him because he's so far over there. He says, come back, come back. For some of us, we've been so busy pushing him that far. See, God has a plan for you. You need to know that. God has a plan for you. It doesn't matter what you've done in your past. It doesn't matter that weight that you're carrying around. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that mistake that you've made. God has a purpose and a plan for each one of you. He has a plan for you. And no one can rob that plan from you except you. You have free will. No one can rob that plan from you except you. God has a plan for you. God has a part for people falling apart. But in order to hear that part, some of us, we need to stop talking and start listening. Some of us, we're too busy talking to ever hear it. We need to stop talking and start listening. Zechariah, what did he have to do? He questioned, what does the angel do? He shuts him up. He says, fine, you're not going to talk for 5 months, for 9 months, however long it takes for this baby to get here, which I assume was 9 months. You're not going to talk. You're not talking. You need to stop talking. And when you stop talking, what do you start doing naturally? Listening. You have to. If any of you have ever done premarital counseling or marriage counseling, you might have heard of active listening. Active listening is trying to truly understand what the other person is saying. And it's the best tool if you're a married couple to practice active listening. But it's so hard. A lot of times when my wife is talking to me and we're in an argument, I'm just waiting for her to stop talking so then I can now say my thing. That's not listening, right? Active listening means, okay, I'm going to listen and try to understand what you're saying. And you can't listen if you're talking. Some of us, we need to stop talking and start listening. Some of you aren't hearing the part God has for you simply because you won't shut up. That's why you won't hear it. You've allowed your past failures and your mistakes to define who you are and saying, God can't do this for me. And you've allowed that and you just kept talking so much that God can't communicate with you because you won't stop. And what's going to happen is eventually God might have to shut you up in order for you to hear him. Because that's how much he loves you. You might say, what does it mean by stop talking? A lot of us, we talk by defining ourselves with our sin. I'm just an angry person. God can't use me. I'm just anxious. I just worry so much. I'm addicted to this. I can't be used by God. I know my past. I'm a jerk. I'm whatever. I just can't do it. And we allow our failures to become our friends, and we start defining ourselves with those. Some of us, we just keep talking. Some of us, we're too busy blaming God without ever going to him. I've seen this over and over and over. I'll talk to people and say, I just don't feel God's presence anymore. And I'll say, okay, when was the last time you read your Bible or prayed? Like, well, I prayed once this week. It's like, well, that's probably why. Because if you keep going further and further and further away, and you turn around and you expect him to be there, when you're walking away from him, of course he's all over there. Some of you have been so busy blaming God for not showing up when you've been the one walking away from him for so long. Some of us need to stop talking. Some of us, we are too busy blaming our current condition on somebody else. We're too busy talking. We need to stop talking and start listening. I understand that some of us have bad past, and we have parents that didn't treat us the way they were supposed to, or people that haven't treated us the way we're supposed to, and they put you in a bad situation. I get it, and that's not your fault. But when you continually blame those people for who you are today, then you're allowing those people to continue to control you. You're too busy talking. Some of us need to stop talking and start listening. None of us want to go through pain in life, but I believe that God allows us to go through pain, sometimes because we cause it, sometimes because we live in a broken world that's full of sin. But I believe that God allows us to go through pain sometimes so that he can get our attention. Some of us, we need to hit rock bottom in order to turn back to him. Some of us need to stop talking, start listening. When I was a volunteer at a youth group 10, 15 years ago, I was a small group leader there, and we would go on these trips all the time. We went to there's two different trips, middle school and high school trip that were both at Ocean City, and I would always go because I was a small group leader. And so this trip comes, and I'm going, and I'm a leader there. And at that time, I was pretty much like the worst I had ever been. I was working at a restaurant, and if any of you ever worked at a restaurant, you know the kind of the culture of it, and I was all about the culture of it. I was partying all the time. I was doing things I did not want to do, completely addicted to porn. My whole life was not the way I wanted it to be. So I'm at this trip, and I'm trying to be a good, godly leader for these students, while in my head, I don't even know if I believe it anymore. So I'm playing this part, and I'm faking it, and I'm doing this, and we're at this trip, and every sermon I hear is the same. I know the song, so I pretend I play the part because I know how to play the part. I've been playing the part for a while. So I play the part, and I'm just listening to it, and it's like, okay, yep, got it. And then the last night we were there, we said another day, but the last night, the preacher comes and he starts preaching. And you ever feel like when you hear someone preach, like they're just preaching right at you? You ever felt that way? Like you're just preaching like you get goosebumps. And he was preaching at me, it felt like. And he was talking about how no matter what you've done, you can always come back, kind of pretty similar to what we're talking about today. And I just really started to feel like I should be doing something. I should take a step. And so I'm sitting there, and they have everyone bow their heads, and they do an altar call. They ask everyone that wants to come up and pray and rededicate their life or give their life to Christ to come on up. And in my head, I just feel like I need to go up. But then on the other side of my head, I'm thinking, well, but you've done all this, but you're not the right person. So I'm battling in my head during this altar call, so much so that I don't go up there. And all of a sudden, then the last song starts playing, and everyone stands up, and they start doing this last song. And I sit there. At this point, I'm done faking it. I sit there like this during the last song because I'm mad now. At first, I'm mad that I didn't go up. And then I start thinking, well, but God doesn't really speak to me. And I start thinking, like, God, all these preachers talk about, then I heard this from God. I never had that experience. Where's my experience? I've been a good Christian person. So then I start getting mad at God. And I'm sitting there silently while all the students are singing. I'm mad. I'm done. And then this verse popped up in my head while I'm just sitting there like all angry and bitter. And I don't know if it was God. I don't know what it was. I think it was God, but I heard this verse, and it's from Psalms. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." I heard this verse, "Be still and know that I am God." I sensed it, thought about this verse, "Be still and know that I am God." So I took some time to stop talking, to stop wrestling in my head, to stop blaming and just took some time just to sit there and just let God speak. Without me talking, just be in his presence. And I started to feel this overwhelming sense of peace, of conviction and forgiveness at the same time. I've just felt like God was just there with me. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. So that night, all the students meet, and I tell everybody about I was mad, and I tell them the story. Next day we wake up, and we go to the last session, and we're walking in. Everyone's really quiet, and the greeters are saying, "Hey, everyone, be really quiet when you walk in." I say, "Okay." So I walk in, and I have to walk in really quiet. And while I'm walking in, I go to sit in my seat, and I look up at the screens, and there's one verse on the screens: "Be still and know I am God." Be still and know that I am God. The God we serve is the God of another chance. If you need another chance, God is in the business of another chance. You need a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. God will give you another chance. Whenever you need another chance, God gives it to you. God gives it to you. God has a part for people falling apart. And if you're here and you feel like that your mistakes or your past or your situations is making it hard for you to go, and you feel like your life is falling apart, God is not done with you. God has a part for you. You are a gift that Jesus ransomed his life for so that you can have another chance. That's who you are. So the question I want us to wrestle with is this: where do you need another chance? Where do you need another chance? Is it with your kids? You need another chance? Is it with your spouse? Is it with your parents? Is it with a friend? Where do you need another chance? Is it with the church? Do you need another chance with God? Where do you need another chance? Because wherever you need it, God gives it to you. We have to stop talking and start listening. But God is the God of another chance. God has a part for people falling apart. So what I want you to wrestle with this week, and as we sing this closing song, is this question: where do I need another chance? Can we take some time to pray together? Dear God, I thank you for always giving us another chance, for sending your Son in this Christmas season that we celebrate, for sending your Son to give up his life for our another chance. That no matter what we've done, no matter who we are, we never outrun you. We never outrun your plans. You have a plan for us. You have a purpose for us. You look at us like your sons and daughters and give us that purpose. You have a plan for us. You have a part for us to play. Thank you for being the God of another chance. Some of you in this room, you need another chance in something. I don't know what it is. But today you came, and maybe you came in with this heavy heart, or maybe you were reminded of it while we were here. And you think, I need another chance. I've made mistakes. My situations aren't like they were supposed to be. It didn't turn out the way it was supposed to turn out. I need a do-over. I need another chance. God is telling you today, he's not done with you. You have another chance. If that's you, I just wanted to take some time to pray for you. So if you're here and you feel like I need another chance in something, I just want to ask you to just slip up your hand and say, that's me. Can you pray for me? I see that hand. I see those hands. I see that hand. Okay, I pray for people here that desperately need another chance. Might need a do-over. That need the grace that you offer. Remind them that you are the God that gives us another chance. You are the God that loves us. You are the God that gives us hope, that gives us peace. God, for these people, I just pray that you help them to stop talking, start listening to you, to spend time with you. Embrace the peace and the comfort you give us. I pray you just help them to not be defined by their sin and not be defined by their mistakes, but to let you define us. I just want to give you guys some time before we play our closing song to just stop talking and just listen. Take some time right now to just listen to whatever God wants to say to you. Take some time. God, thank you for never giving up on us. Thank you for always being there for us. No matter what we've done, no matter how far we've run, you always give us another chance. Thank you for that. God, help us to move closer to you, to take some time throughout this week, every day, to stop talking and start listening. It's hard. God, we want to be in your presence. Thank you for your love. Praise you in your son's name. Amen. I want you guys to take, we're going to play a closing song here. And I just want you guys to take this time. You can stand, you can sit, whatever you want to do, but just take some time to stay in God's presence. Stop talking, start listening. Let's sing this closing song together.